Tonight's speaker, Grant Romer, is a world-renowned authority on early photography. He's a conservator, educator, and newly retired director of conservation at the International Museum of Photography at the George Eastman House in Rochester, New York. Mr. Romer specializes in the history, practice, and preservation of the daguerreotype, and since 1975, Mr. Romer has practiced and taught this striking 19th century form of photography, gaining intimate knowledge of the medium. His uniquely extensive scholarship and experience is an invaluable resource to collectors, dealers, and institutions, and it's our privilege tonight to benefit from his scholarship. Please welcome Mr. Grant Romer.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. It's very nice to be invited to give a talk. I normally don't impose myself upon any audience. It's by invitation that I am standing here. It's somewhat challenging to give this talk because we have a mixed audience. There are people in the audience who know more than I do about certain aspects of the history of the daguerreotype, as well as I assume there are people in the audience who may have very little acquaintance with the history and the special nature of this process. The fundamental question is, why would there be a society devoted to a particular form of photography? Why would it gather in great number here in Atlanta? Is this some sort of secret society with occult practices? Yes, the answer is yes. It is a secret society with occult practices. And part of my job is to explain to you why you might want to be a member or try to avoid having anything to do with this crowd. So for those of you who are quite as capable as I of giving this talk, which is fundamentally a sort of introduction to why is the daguerreotype worthy of your an hour of your time on a what's this, Wednesday night? Something good on television you're missing? See? Why is it worth missing something good on television to hear me talk about the daguerreotype? So for those of you who are, as I said, capable of giving this talk and have given the talk, I am inviting you to look at that task again. How would you go about it? The story is very familiar to many of us. It's been told very well long ago by people like Beaumont Newhall. How do you make it fresh and meaningful today when many things about photography and the history of photography and these technologies have changed? For those of you who've never heard it before and it's news to you, it's an opportunity to get some insight into why in heavens would anyone pay attention to a bunch of old photographs. It has been questioned, and quite validly questioned. One of my main tasks is also to speak meaningfully. But what is meaningful speaking? And it's one thing to say, I want to say something meaningful, but what's meaningful? What would be meaningful? What would be useful to you? One of the meaningful things would be to connect. This is a lonely life, if you haven't noticed it by now. I have. You were born really alone into it, you spend your time alone during it, and you go out alone, even though you have company. You're alone in a certain way. And there are special moments in life when you don't feel so alone, when you are connected to others. And the Daguerrean Society has given me a family of, really a family, my relatives, my own kind, the tribe that I am most comfortable with. you know, it could be collecting Coke bottles or hubcaps or stamps. But for the daguerreotype, there's also another connection. It's through the daguerreotype that one connects to generations of the past and a particular generation of the past. And I hope I succeed. That's my goal, is to connect us up and show you how, through the daguerreotype, through the things that survive from the past, as well as the special nature of those things, we are able to be less alone than normal. Now, what the hell am I talking about? Everybody here, when you were born into the world, photography was already here. I don't care how old you are. It was already here and it was already old. It was also very familiar. It's really not that old in human history terms. 1839 is when it becomes introduced to the world. I'm 60 years old. That's what, 3 of me or something? And my life seems to have been really not very long at all. So it's not a great deal of time. But in other ways, it is, and we are not so under the thrill of photography as the world once was. We take it for granted. We are using it all the time. We don't stop in our normal life to reflect upon its special nature. The most you might say is, oh, photography is very magical. Because what the hell does that mean? We don't believe in magic, do we? And if you do, well, make something happen, please. A pot of gold appear here, right now. See, you don't really believe in magic, so what do you mean? What do you mean? It would be much better to say it's wonderful or it's marvelous, it's surprising, it's astonishing, it makes something happen that gives me the willies. That's better than to say it's magical. As I get older, I find that I'm looking at photographs different than I did when I was young. This is the first photograph that I remember being made. It was made in the Bronx in 1949. I remember my father taking the picture. I remember my mother standing next to him and drawing my attention away from my father. You can see I'm not looking at the camera. And my father took that picture from here. Pictures that are made from here are different than pictures that are made from here. When I was a young man and had my own camera, I had a 35mm camera, and I used to scratch my glasses with it, right, looking through that little hole. Now you see pictures are made from here, and who knows where the next place pictures are going to be made from. But I assure you, give 20 years and it'll be coming from a different place. I have lived long enough to see photography change in very, very, very significant ways. Photography changes in 20-year increments. If they can't make it better, they make it different just to sell it to a new generation. We're in the beginning of the digital era. The digital revolution is over. It won. Right. It won. And mark my words, around 2020, you'll see something new come into the world, and whether you want it or not, you'll have it. But it won't necessarily be better for you. It'll be better for the people that sell it to you, though. That's for sure. This is the lessons of history. And one of the things that history is good for is you learn lessons from it. Again, I remember this day, and I used to love going to the lake in Bronx Park. And I remember being disappointed because I thought water was clear. My goldfish bowl at home was clear. And I don't know if it was this day or another day, but it was somewhere around there that I was looking in the water and I was going, well, how come I can't see the fish down at the bottom? What's this? Is this water? How come it's different? And as I was looking, some green-faced thing came up and looked at me. I was a fish or something. It's come up out of the nowhere as far as I was concerned. And not only did I see it, but it saw me. And from that moment on, I had a different relationship with the world. It explains something to me. You're better off not knowing what it is, but there was a point in all of our lives where somebody held us up to a mirror. You've all probably had a child in your arms and brought it to a mirror and went, look, 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 and boing, right? Maybe not the first time, maybe not the second, but at some point, boing, you see yourself in the mirror. You recognize yourself. Sometimes it seems cats and dogs. Certainly apes do. You can get a big monkey to come out of a tree with a mirror. Right? But all of us have had that moment where we have been changed, dramatically changed. And yet that's swallowed and so deep in us that I almost remember that moment. I certainly know the feeling of looking into a mirror and looking and looking. As I get older, I look harder and it hurts more and more. Right? You know that feeling? All right? You don't want anybody in there with you when you're doing that looking. Right? There's still a relationship that's going on that's a very fundamental life relationship with seeing something else. And there's something in photography that is like that. In Julius Caesar, Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, I like the music. It's okay. Cassius says to Brutus, tell me, good Brutus, can you see your face? And Brutus says back, no, Cassius, for the eye sees not itself, but by reflection, by some other thing. Right? We can't see ourselves. Our eyes are here and we can't get them around that way. It's by reflection. The mirror is the first of the optical instruments. If you learn the history of optics, the mirror comes before the lens, way before the lens. The mirror is a very powerful, powerful instrument of what? Of reflection and self-reflection. And I don't know, isn't it amazing that the first practical photographic process comes in the form of essentially a mirror. The daguerreotype, everyone who knows what a daguerreotype is knows what it is, but it's a metal plate that is essentially a piece of copper with a silver surface that's polished to the surface of a mirror. And the more it is polished and shiny, the better off it is in many different ways, not only chemically clean, but there's a daguerreotype plate. If you've never seen one, you see, look, I can make, there. I can annoy the translator. With the mirror, the first form of photography, the first practical system of photography, the system that for 15 years was commercially dominant in the world, the first practical, commercially dominant system of photography is essentially a form of mirror. Now, I'm not superstitious and I'm not a believer. But isn't that poetically appropriate that photography comes in this form? Now, This one's a rather badly treated one. It has been knocked around. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to flash you. It's scratched. I'm going to hand it around for those of you who have never seen one. It's not a good thing to do. Most daguerreotypes that were ever made have been destroyed through direct handling and neglect. They're at once very durable and very delicate. It's really necessary to protect this with a secondary housing, but knowing the experience of understanding that the photograph is an object, not just an image, is a very, very important change of consciousness about photography. We think about photography as imagery. The specialists, the collectors, the nuts, think about it as an object. Sure, it's nice if there's a great image on that object. Right? The object's really worth only about maybe 50 cents. With a great image, it can be worth $500,000. Right? But the image without the object is worth 50 cents. Right? What's that relationship? It's not the normal way you think. Casey, would you do me the favor? And those of you who have handled your own daguerreotypes don't need to look at it, but just so you get some sense of what that is. It's important to understand that when you're looking at daguerreotypes, you're looking at very special objects that have optical qualities that are distinctly different than the types of photographs that you're most familiar with. This special nature of the daguerreotype, that it is made out of metal, that it is precious metal, that it's necessary to be put in a housing, that it is easily damaged, but it's also easily well taken care of by very simple means, is part of the allure of the daguerreotype. One of the great questions of life and history is the question of, were people different back then than we are today? 100 years ago, were they different? 200 years ago, were they different? 300 years ago, were they different? 1,000 years ago, were they different? 20,000 years ago, were they different? Or are we really the same? I believe you can't change humans, where fundamental nature is the same and has been the same for a long time. But other things around us have changed. And those things very much influence the experience of life. And of course, those experiences of life are significant in the, you know, I just was sick recently and they introduced me to the idea of quality of life. That beautiful euphemism. You will have a diminished quality of life if you don't take this pill. Do you want that? No. Then take that pill. Okay. I don't want a diminished quality of life. Just for fun, the daguerreotype is most popular in a size that's called a 6 plate, basically the size of the palm of your hand. The type of imagery that was carried on the body was meant to be almost warm. And just for fun, I wanted to see it fits perfectly in with this thing that we now carry with us. It hands commensurate. It's no accident at all that this is the same size. And of course, that's the banana man. Forget the banana man, but I'm loaded, right? I can take daguerreotypes out, but most daguerreotypes are this size, and they're in a case. It's a miniature case. It comes from a miniature painting. And the experience of seeing it is seeing it in a housing that is protective and aesthetically enhancing of the experience. This one has tarnish, just like your silver jewelry, your silverware. Silver reacts with sulfur in the air, and you have colored tarnish. But it's given 170 years of being in this rough world, it's in pretty wonderful condition, considering everything. And because somebody took care of it, because it was precious, and they understood the nature of the object. If you don't know what it is, you can destroy it in a few seconds. This morning, I purchased here in town, and many of us are here to buy these things, a daguerreotype that has virtually no tarnish on it. It is virtually like the day it was made. That's like 1850, 60, 70, 80, 90, 1900. Oh, man. It's 107. Right? Shouldn't have sold me this. This is in remarkably good condition, considering everything. I dare say that picture that I showed you of me, not only have I deteriorated since it was made, but that photograph is not anything like its original aspect. It has gone through significant chemical deterioration that has altered the colors, both density loss and color shift in the imaging material. How is it possible that the first form of photography, not only is a mirror, not only is extremely delicate and easily destroyed, but at the same time more permanent in a certain way, given a little bit of care? No one recommends put your photographs in wood or in leather and cloth. No one says that that's archival storage. But a little bit of wood in the right place, a little bit of glass in the right place, a little bit of metal, a little bit of cloth in the right place, in the right arrangement, is enough to keep this piece of silver, which will tarnish in a day significantly, 170 years in decent condition. It seems that this first form of photography was special. Of course, before photography, if you wanted your likeness to be preserved, well, for your family, at the very least, your descendants. If you're a hero, you want to be immortalized also by your society. Having your portrait made, whether in sculpture or painting or drawing, was a way of honoring you on a higher level. It was a great distinction and a privilege to have a recognizable and beautiful quality likeness made of you in your lifetime. Here is just about the time of the early 1830s, a very beautiful family portrait, a German portrait, a composite portrait, it feels. Each of those pictures were probably made at a different sitting, but beautifully put together, beautifully rendered, beautifully conceived. But gee, not everybody could have that. Very, very few could have that. And it's still, we use the term more or less, but sometimes it's a lot less than it is more. Those people didn't really look that good. Not all the time. It's less like them rather than more like them in a certain way. In other ways, of course, it captures their individual nature. We like to think we're all very individual and special, but we're a hell of a lot more like each other than we are unlike each other. There's a great redundancy of humanity. As I said, not only do we see, I think, that our fundamental nature hasn't changed over time, but also at this time, we're not that much different, or they wouldn't call us human. We obviously have something, a hell of a lot in common. Something about men, separate them from women too, or they wouldn't have two names for them. Oh, Grant, what are you talking about, right? Well, I'm talking about something I think that we don't normally think about, we don't want to think about, but bears thinking about, because it does also get to the fundamental question of how connected are we now, the people in this room, and how connected are we to the past, for instance, the people in this painting. This is paint. This is basically colored mud on cloth. Pretty good trick. You can push it around and it comes out looking like that. Wow. Pretty good trick. I'm always amazed by that trick. Of course, when photography came along, a pretty good trick was introduced to the world. I've shown this a number of times, sort of the apocryphal first moment of the first successful daguerreotype being made. And it's symbolically representing the aspect of photography that it comes from the arts, particularly the graphic arts, and it comes from science. Both chemistry and physics are blended together in the technology of photography. And there's something particular about photography that distinguishes it from drawing and painting, or we wouldn't call it photography. But what is that thing that distinguishes it from mud on cloth that can look like reality? What is it about photography that warrants it having a different name? And photography can be many different processes. The daguerreotype is different than digital photography. Both are photography, but they're sure very different. What's common to them and what's different to them is a topic we don't normally sit and dwell upon very long, and certainly we don't articulate very well. Not only do we not really understand photography deeply and are able to articulate whatever understanding we have very well, but we do not understand the special nature of the different forms of photography which distinguish them. We can see it, we can feel it, but we cannot necessarily express it and communicate it very well to others. What did people in the 1830s want with photography? The historians say, well, people needed photography, that's why photography came into existence. 1839 should be celebrated not as the year photography was introduced to the world. It certainly wasn't the year the first photograph was made or the invention was discovered. The year is significant because it's the year someone finally made some money from the idea of photography. And they've been making it ever since. Photography is about making money for somebody. It's not given to you for free. It's an industry. It's a business. Melville said, I love Melville, he said, there's mystery in the morning, and there's mystery in the evening, and there's mystery everywhere if you have time and taste for it. But the fact remains that purse and mouth must be fed. Indeed. Indeed. So there's, yes, mystery and beauty in the daguerreotype and in photography, but there's also commerce. There's also business. And the great business, the great way to make money with photography immediately was people wanted to see themselves in the new medium. It was through portraiture that money could be made. People didn't want to see pictures of Egypt. One would do for most people. You didn't want it. But they're more interested in seeing what they looked like through this miraculous new technology that gave a truer, because it was science or the sun itself, nature, that painted the picture. So you could see the truth about yourself. Of course, we don't want to see the truth really about ourselves. It's quite shocking whenever we see it. Daguerreotypes were made in the millions in the United States. They were made in the millions in the world, but in the United States in 1851, it's estimated that at least 3 million daguerreotypes were made in the United States alone. And very quickly, the business of portrait daguerreotyping was conventionalized. People didn't want very different pictures of themselves from the pictures other people had. They preferred to have pictures like other people had. We don't want to be too weird, too odd, too out of step with the rest of society. One gets punished for that. Haven't you found that out yet? The Daguerrean Society is hiding here in Atlanta, having been driven out of other places. Happened to the Mormons, right? Anyway, it was so standardized that it was made fun of in the magazines and cartoons of the time, how common typical daguerreotypes were. So pictures of grandpa, pictures of grandma, pictures of mom and pa before marriage, pictures of mom and pa after marriage, pictures of the baby, pictures of sis, pictures of junior, right? Same pictures we got. Your shoebox at home is pictures of grandpa, pictures of grandma, right? Mom and pa before marriage, mom and pa after marriage, it's a different picture, right? It's the great redundancy of life that is reflected in the daguerreotype, and it was noticed then. As I said, they were made in the millions, they've been destroyed in the millions, but because they were millions, there's still a lot around. You go to eBay, you go daguerreotype. This was yesterday's first page, right? There are 1,400 things, 1,500 things that come up under that. And sure enough, there's grandma, grandpa, mom, pa before marriage, mom, pa after marriage. This is the market for the collectors of daguerreotypes. This is the middle and low-end market. Great daguerreotypes don't normally show up on eBay, but what are called garden variety. I'm a garden variety guy. I'm not special. I'm one of those potatoes that probably wouldn't make it to the supermarket. A little misshapen, and not what sells easy in that market. Potato chips. I'm better off for potato chips for bulk sale. This is the cull for the most part. Occasionally something wonderful comes out, but for the most part, this is what you find in daguerreotyping. Now, you could say these are like passport photos or driver's licenses. Everybody hates their driver's license picture, right? How many of you have had it taken again because you didn't like it, right? Pretty standard, right? Oh, I don't want to show you that. It's not very good, This is the answer. The daguerreotype is the ancestor of that. Now, that's interesting. They've been taking them driving license pictures before they were driving licenses. How's that possible? It's because they didn't work very hard to make a good likeness or a complementary and artistically conceived depiction of the human being. It's just a straight shot. They're not thinking about it. There's a lot that goes into the making of a picture. You just don't point and shoot and get something wonderful spilling out of the camera. It takes effort, it takes sensibility, it takes competition, it takes evolution. You borrow from this and that, and you gradually put it. It takes talent. Lots of things go into it. So the, mugshot, it's only interesting when it's a celebrity, really. Otherwise, it's just a mug. Right? Criminals are quite common. Old Johnny Cash, poor old Johnny, busted for what? Pot? He didn't do anything wrong. Right? He's not a big criminal, Johnny Cash, but gee, that's mugshot. Well, how, to see a daguerreotype. Sorry, it's very yellow for some reason here. But the crowd here that's daguerreotype collectors thrilled to this. By the way, if I'm showing anybody's property without permission, I'm sorry. Thank you, for the use of that. But this daguerreotype is a double exposure on a single plate. It's not just a mugshot. It's a technical, special example of multiple exposure photography in a period when you think they didn't do that. It turns out that not only is it extraordinarily beautiful, extraordinarily permanent, but it's not primitive really at all. It's extraordinarily sophisticated what was done in the daguerreotype. The histories tell you, oh, very long exposures and very primitive. They didn't know what to do with it. It took a long time to figure out. They figured it out in a day. There was a very sophisticated culture. Of course, not everyone in it, but culture was very high. I dare say there's evidence it was higher in many ways than the culture we share today. And they weren't any stupider than we are. I used to be more stupid. Anyway, this business of, how do you get someone in front of the camera? The camera, yeah, was around, but everybody didn't have it, and certainly everyone wasn't used to sitting in front of it. The experience of sitting in front of the camera, still, how many of you are comfortable when somebody points a camera at you? And you're very used to it. You go, don't take my picture. Right? Much less the one that looks like a Canon. Right? When was the last time you went to the studio photographer and sat for the large format? Well, some of you remember, well, when I was a little boy, my mother took me to the studio. That was in 1925. You don't go to the studio anymore for large format pictures. That's an experience we don't have anymore. It's an uncomfortable, and it certainly was an unfamiliar experience for the people of the 1840s who had really nothing to compare with it. Sitting for an artist is not the same as sitting in front of some box that seems to have a big glass eye that's aimed at you. And it's like the dread of standing in front of the class and giving a presentation. You see many early daguerreotypes that are really very primitive presentations, very straightforward. A lot is made of that. Well, this shows the primitive times. They didn't know how to pose. They didn't know how to light. It's like primitive folk paintings, this type of story. Well, there are daguerreotypes that look like that, but not all daguerreotypes look like that. There's some that look like that. There's lots that look like that, but there's lots that do not look like that. The more you see, the more you see the differences, and that's something that the Daguerrean Society does. Because of the mirror surface, it's very hard to photograph. It's also very hard to see in any light. You have to work a little bit to see it. Not very hard. It's no great mystery, but with the right lighting, you see something different. Now, this is a little more than that other picture that I showed you. Let me go back to it. Here's a straightforward picture, but here's a slightly twisted, a little, but this is a different world. This is a different picture. This is a different concept. This is a different life to this photograph than the other one. And yet they're made at the same time, the same process, two different photographers with different sensibilities. 10 years later, you might get one like this, in which it's straight photography. There's no real art. But this is different than the other one. Look comparatively at these three fairly simple, artless presentations of a young woman sitting in front of a camera. And you see three different visual realities. You see different life in the sitters. You see light differently. You see space differently. You see hair differently. You see flesh differently. You see form differently. What accounts for that? Also, you must remember that most of these daguerreotypes were made as tokens of affection and love. You didn't have 500 photographs of yourself made in the 1840s and 50s. Most people, they might have one. They might think, I'm going to have one made. I'm going to get me one of them daguerreotypes. And I'm going to give it to Mama, or Grandma, or Susie. Right? When you get the camera out, when do you get it? You get it for birthdays, weddings, departures, anniversaries, special moments, right? These things are made also in the same way. They're made at special moments. Going to the studio and laying down hard cash, good money, to have your picture made was a formal, very conscious act. And it's an investment, and it's an investment in your likeness for someone else, not for yourself, for someone else. And this gift, this given to you, had a weight that's different than you giving your picture to somebody. I don't give my picture to anybody anymore. I don't think I ever gave my picture to anybody. They took it, but I didn't give it to them. And think about that. But this is the era in which these things were gifts. They were symbolic of a special moment, of a special sentiment, and they had a different weight. Literally and figuratively, spiritually, they had a different weight. So, you know, grandmas are grandmas, you know, who cares? No one want to collect grandmas, you know, but this is a living likeness of a human being who everything else about her is gone from the world probably, but here's her picture. She still can be seen and believed in as an individual. She probably had grandchild that she loved, right? The daguerreotype of the grandchild gave her a thrill. Here, this little child with a wooden gun, I think, just like Papa. Right? And of course, for the collectors of daguerreotypes, that's the one you want. You don't want just a kid sitting in a chair. Even if it's a pretty kid in a chair, better it's holding something interesting, like a toy gun. And you don't want just a man sitting in a chair. Better a man with a hat, or suspenders, or a funny tie than just a man, well-dressed man. But a man with a gun or a man with a knife, that's more interesting. That's more valuable. There's more of a desire to have that. What I'm mostly showing you, though, is what's off of eBay. If you can't get interested in the daguerreotype from the common daguerreotype, forget about the other ones, really. You're not going to see what's really special about them until you learn what's special about the common daguerreotype. And most of us don't give a damn about the past. Why should you care? Who was president in 1845? The Daguerrean crowd, no. How about 1825? No president. There were no presidents in 1825. See, the Daguerrean crowd cares also. It's through these photographs that one can see and believe in the life of that time. Even if it's just somebody sitting in a chair, you can believe in it. That's part of the power of photography. All right, what's the U.S. population in 1845? Right? Why should I know that? There's more people than that in New York City, I think. Certainly in Sao Paulo, Brazil, or Mumbai, in a single city in the world today. That's the population of the United States. If they made 4 million daguerreotypes in 1851, and let's say on an average they made 1 million daguerreotypes for 10 years, 10 million daguerreotypes for the years that the daguerreotype was commercially going, they made a daguerreotype for 1 out of 2 people in the country. No other country in the world made more daguerreotypes than the United States. Why? Why? Don't answer. Population of New York City in 1845. Not a hell of a lot of people. London had 2.5 million. Biggest city on earth in 1845. The world was different. People weren't different. The world was different. Certain things about the world were different. And those things matter when it comes to understanding why these things are different than the photographs we have today. All right, I'm going to very quickly take you through the experience of if you lived in New York City or you went on a trip to New York City. I'm from New York City, so I'm going to go. Although my ancestors were colonial settlers of Georgia, by the way. You believe that? Yeah, somebody was, and why not? Why not me? My father's side were colonial settlers of New Amsterdam. So I'm down by law on both sides of the family, but that and $2.50 will get me on the bus in New York City. No special privilege. Anyway, New York City only went up to about Houston Street. If you know New York City, most of the city was on the lower end in population there. This is a daguerreotype that's, again, sorry for the color, it's distorted here in projection, but this shows the paving of Broadway. It's in the collection of someone in the room here. These are the great views of the country that are obviously documents of the greatest importance to understanding the history of New York City, of the country, of the world, etc. Look at the quality. This is early 1850s. It's a photograph that compares very favorably with any photograph that could be made today. The standard was the same that we have today for photography. Along Broadway and along Park Row were the daguerreotypists all the way up to Canal Street. In 1851, there was 110 different studios in New York City. 1851, with a population of 400,000 people, we'll count Brooklyn and part of New Jersey's population, there's 110 studios working in New York City. Walking down the street, you might see certain advertisements. You'll catch your eye. This is a later studio, the late 1850s, but there's the emblem of the camera. It says Daguerreotypes. There's 2 daguerreotype studios here. There's Frederick's studio. Matter of fact, there's Frederick's on the balcony. But next to it here is Anson's studio, Rufus Anson. It's at street level that you'd see the samples of the photographer's work. And I don't know why you'd go in here instead of there. What was the choice? I am not entirely sure. But quality, would quality be a factor? Well, what qualities were they looking at? There's a little closer view and you can see there the framed examples in the entrance to Frederick's studio. You can't quite make it out here in this projection, but in these windows are the example for Rufus Anson's studio. Daguerreotypes, large size for 50 cents. Well, I might go in there first, because the other one looks far more expensive there. That's without a case, by the way, which cost you $3. Those of you who've gone shopping for coffins know something about shopping. You go in, you go, I need a coffin. They show you the $10,000 one, or something a little cheaper. They show you one made out of cardboard. Well, you got something a little bit better, something, and they show you the $5,000 one. Now, I'll take that one. It was the same with cases. 50-cent daguerreotype would give you just in a cardboard box. Well, oh, what's this? I want a case. Well, case is $3. So you'd go into the gallery area where there was a display of the work and also celebrity portraits, etc. And you'd negotiate it. You see here in the front, this is the Mead Brothers studio. You'd see examples. You'd pick the size, the aesthetic that you wanted. And then, once you said okay, you had to then go into the studio, would have your picture made. Now, the experience, I'm sure, was very much like going into the dentist office for the first time. It was an unfamiliar thing. You're with a stranger. You're going to sit down in something that, what's that? Without an experience to equate it with, you're going to be uneasy. Who's that guy? Do you like that guy? I don't like his looks. It's too late now. I'm in the studio, right? They've got me. And you're going to have to go along with the program. This is the studio of Marcus Root. And you can see the apprehensive position of the dog shows that, so this is not the normal business going on here. It's a very, very accurate depiction, even down to the likeness of Marcus Root. That's what the interior of these places looked like. They weren't necessarily large rooms. And of course, facing the daguerreotypes again. I'm sorry for the color. I don't know why it's this color. It's not that color on the screen here. But again, that moment where they take the cap off, the exposures are long relative to exposures today, but they weren't minutes as you read. It was the very first weeks that they were minutes. Very rapidly, the exposure times were brought down. The average exposure time was 5 to 8 seconds, all the way up until the 1880s for studio portraiture. The daguerreotype could be made relatively fast, but still, that 8 seconds is 8 heartbeats, unless you have atrial fibrillation, and it's 16, which you might be having when you're sitting in front of that camera there. Understanding the camera and what was going on was beyond most people. And again, the dealing with the expression was a problem. This cartoon shows this daguerreotypist directing the sitter to view that painting, which seems to be a man murdering children. And in such circumstances, you might not get the most perfect at ease expression on your face. And this handling of the expression was a very, very big issue. And of course, if you're collecting daguerreotypes, you can collect in any zone, in any flavor, in any part of the spectrum. High artistic work, or so bad you can't believe they bought and kept the thing. I've got a great collection of those. They're cheaper. But some of them, you go, what? Out of focus and blurry and just bad, and yet they were bought and kept. You can buy crappy artistic work and great primitive work, funny-looking people. You know, so much of TV is about making fun of people. I'm not big on making fun of people. I don't think people are very funny. I don't like being made fun of myself. So, see how quiet we are? You don't like being made fun of either, do you? But the laugh that this picture got was the laugh it got in 1845, really, too. This guy kept it, though. He kept it. It's not the most complimentary portrait by any means, but it was kept. A lot of people didn't understand what was going on. When the photographer turned his back, they'd get up during the exposure and look in the camera. There's lots of reference to this, particularly guys from the country. They didn't know how it worked, and they ruined the picture. So, do you know how it works? Do you know how that digital camera works? I don't know. When I was a boy, cameras were empty. There was nothing inside them. Now they're solid. There doesn't seem to be any space inside them. What is all that junk? Right? You don't understand it, so you still can look in a camera. Anyway, the daguerreotype process, you don't need to know it. They didn't know it then, the average person, and you're not going to know it now. And you had all sorts of people go into the business. For $50, you could get a camera and 3 days lesson, and you were in business. And you got paid to practice. It was up to you whether you made a living or not. It was a business that all sorts of people went into right away. Not everyone stayed in it. There was a big turnover, but you got everything from guys who thought they were artists, some scientists, some doctors, some pharmacists, of course, a lot of jewelry workers, opticians, spectacle makers, cowboys, blacksmiths, carpenters, contemporary daguerreotypists. By the way, there's lots in the room, and there's a big show. You should ask, what does that guy do for a living? And you'll see, still, it attracts quite a wide variety of people to it. But as a business, it offered a little bit of investment and great potential opportunity. If we were in the Daguerrean era now, there'd be lots of infomercials at 3 o'clock at night for become a daguerreotypist. In 3 weeks, you can earn $250,000. Now, not only bad daguerreotypists, but bad sitters. It was never a good business being a photographer. Any business that has to do with a lot of people, dealing with a lot of people, is a bad business. And what are you going to do? These guys come in the door and want their picture made. Say, no, I'm not going to make your picture. You know, things happen. You got mugged. Photographers got mugged. Hawes got mugged. You know that? Yeah, they stole his watch in the 1890s. 2 guys stole his watch and pushed him down, just like today. Anyway, of course, this is the type of clientele you wanted. Not threatening, nice, gentle people, beautiful. Ah, they're all wonderful, wonderful, wonderful pictures. No 2 of these things are really alike. All you do is have to look at enough of them with an open heart and an open mind and an open eye and an open brain. Sorry, you got to open a lot of things. But open those 4 things and you'll see wonders, wonderful things. Look, here you're looking back 170 years. You're seeing these people. You're seeing them. You can believe them. This is not some cardboard reality. This is visual reality and more. It's spiritual reality. It's wondrous. Children were hard to get to sit still. There's Ma and Pa after marriage, by the way. Whatever is expressed in their face, that's what they always express, for the most part. But the child, you can see, is quite unsure of what's happening. It's been told, hold still now, which it couldn't do. Right? Hold still, or you'll ruin the picture. Of course, you know, you give them a cat, you know, stuffed cat. Collectors love this stuff. Of course, everybody loves cats and children, you know, and real cats are even better, you know. But getting a real cat to cooperate is real hard. And as we know, some people should not have pets. Now, this wonderful daguerreotype, I'm sorry it's not in color, these are the extraordinary ones. And there are a lot of extraordinary ones. There was such a convention that they quite consciously could play off of that convention, and did so. They had as much a sense of humor back then as we have now. They knew what an interesting picture was. They knew how to make a funny picture. That's hard to do. Try it today. This is to make a funny picture. What? You liked it? Got to be quick, though. But making a good picture of your dog or your cat or your parrot or whatever, look, you know, try to get a good one made today. Look how wonderful this has been done. This is just wonderful. I think it's wonderful. I don't like poodles. I don't like pictures of poodles. But I like this daguerreotype of a picture of a poodle. Right? It's really, that's maybe not even a poodle. I don't even know. Great work, of course, there's plenty. You're not going to see it on eBay. But there was very, very high quality work, technically, artistically, superb, as good as photography has ever been done or ever will be done in the Daguerrean era. This portrait of Frederick Douglass, unfortunately not a good projection. The picture is wonderful on my screen here. I'm sorry, but it's a straight portrait. It's as good a portrait as ever has been made of any human being. The man had a magnificent physiognomy. He was picturesque himself, but being picturesque is not enough. There are other portraits of him that he doesn't look very, very special at all. This one, he's magnificent in. And yet, what makes it magnificent? It's not just him. It's the lighting, it's the framing, it's the exquisite quality of the tonalities. It's the special nature of the daguerreotype that makes this really something unusual in this world that's full of unusual things. Certainly visual thrills are everywhere around, but in the daguerreotype you can get great things. Wow, this is another. These are things from the Daguerrean Society's membership. You don't find this in the antique store every day, but this was found in an antique store. One day, not that long ago. It's why? How much would you pay for this? In an antique, I think he said he paid $50 for this or something. He's probably lying. What? Yeah. I'd pay $500,000 for this. It's been paid for daguerreotypes, by the way. It's been paid. It's been paid. We live in the era where millions of dollars, not just $1 million, but millions of dollars have been paid for photographs. So it's in a different category now. Daguerreotypes, there are daguerreotypes that have sold for $500,000, $750,000. If those daguerreotypes are worth that, there's lots of $1 million daguerreotypes. Try and get that $1 million though. Right? But these things can't be weighed in money value. That's only one way you might be able to get some sort of market going of exchange. These are absolutely priceless treasures. We don't know who made it. We don't know who the guy is. We don't really know the meaning of what's depicted, but this is one of the great ones. This is a picture that stops you, that you want to look at and look at again and again and again. And if you saw the real thing, this is the shadow of the real thing. The real thing is the real thing. Something very different. Ah, this great one, this sculpture. The guy is real at the bottom there. And don't let anyone tell you they couldn't smile. The exposures were too long, that's why they aren't smiling. They didn't want their picture like a smiling fool for the most part. And modern dentistry, let me tell you, has worked wonders. A lot of people had bad teeth back then and didn't want to show those bad teeth. But here you got a little boy with a great smile, not unique. Sorry the slide is bad, but even a bad slide shows you. The note with this said, Silas was very tall. wow, you know, wow, wow. Wow. This is what's hidden in the daguerreotype. This is a secret society. We're going to have to kill you who are not members. You can't leave this room knowing that there are wonderful, wonderful things, that whatever price is being asked is well below what they are really worth. Millions of dollars are spent on cars, junky automobiles. And if you spend $1 million and you keep it in good shape, it may be worth $2 million in 10 years. Or you buy a $1 million yacht, not even a big one. You can sell it in 2 or 3 years for more than that. If you're investing in money, there are better things to buy than daguerreotypes. But if you want to possess wonders, marvelous wonders, things that make you feel good about being a human being, and that's hard to come by, these are incredible treasures, very undervalued, because we undervalue photography, and we undervalue the past. And even the most common of them are wonderful. I regret selling this. What a stupid fool. It's like the handful of magic beans that you got for the cow, you know? That money, I don't know where it went, it was gone. This thing, that gesture, look, this guy knew what he was doing. He's sending a message to here. These people are looking into the camera with the knowledge that they are going to be seen in the future. They're looking at you like that green thing that came out of that pond in the Bronx Park that looked at me. Right? I'm the looker here. You don't look at me, I thought as a little boy. What? Right? He's stronger than you. Right? That guy's stronger than you. What's the message? It's ambiguous, but the strength of it is not. If photography is about anything, it's about time. It's a time technology. It does the impossible. Time cannot be stopped. Unstoppable. And yet, photography stops time. Did they have that consciousness? Yeah. Is the message clear? Photography is a recording technology. Photography is a copying technology. Photography is a dissemination technology, information technology. It's 3 technologies. And what you do with it, those 3 technologies, can be infinitely varied. Of the achievements of humanity, photography is up there with one of the great ones. It's a miracle, a miracle. And yet, it's a miracle that you can have freely without any great pain or cost. What you can do today easily was harder to do back then, but they did back then everything that's been done in photography. Everything that's ever been thought of, and they did it good in the first 15 years of photography in this so-called primitive process, in this so-called primitive country. By the way, we didn't have a very good reputation in the world, and still don't. The messages they have to send us. The ones that are sending messages, if you just collect those, you'll see something, profound. This is as much a message sent from a prophet of the past in words. Here it is sent in visual communication. That gesture, that man, that skull, we understand. eBay. If you've got a good eye and you know what a good quality daguerreotype is, this is on eBay. But you've got to know how to look at it. And you got to look at it not with all of that period frame around, but you look closer. The color is throwing it all off. But look at this young man. There's a universe of things to look at. His hair. Did he use Vitalis or, bear grease? We used to laugh at. Now they put that stuff on people's heads now, right? Again. Look at his clothes. Look at how his cuff is. I can look at this for days. This simple picture. And it's a super quality daguerreotype. Not a very special guy. He's looking away. Of course, that's one of the things you do with portraiture. No one wants to be looked in the eye very long. It either means I love you or I hate you. Right? You got to fight. You look at a dog too long and he knows what it means. You're going to fight. Right? So, diverting light. But the ones that look at you, the ones that look straight into the camera with the consciousness of what they're doing, that it's for the future. Gives you another experience. This is on eBay. Not going to cost hundreds of dollars. What a treasure. What a treasure. Yeah, you can go tonight and bid it and have it. What do you think?
The previous one sold for $91.02. I just looked it up. I had it.
$91.02?
It ended yesterday.
I can't go to McDonald's for $91. I could have. These guys, I like bad boys. I collect these bad boys. What? I'm a good boy. You saw my picture. I'm a good boy. But I like these bad boys. You take away the frame and you have a different experience. It's wonderful. He's not on eBay, by the way. Don't go look. I bought this last year I've been looking all year at this guy. All year. Almost every day I sit down and look at this guy. I don't know what's going on between me and him. I don't know what's going on. I don't know. That's a pretty tough looking, wow, but that's straight photography. There's no period posing or lighting or claptrap. Yeah, he's dressed in the clothes of another time. And very effective clothes too. And he's not smiling. He's not trying to look good. Why did he have this picture made and kept it? But this is infinitely alive. Has engaging me, connects me. I'm connected to this guy. I'm connected to him. And again, I don't know what's going on, but I'm connected to him. I can believe he was a living person. Complex person, a man with a mind, a man with a history. I don't have any picture like me that's going to last that long, that's going to keep me alive 170 years from now. Do I want to be? Yeah, I'd rather be forgotten. But he didn't. Somebody kept his picture. Somebody brought it to the Daguerrean Society. Somebody sold it to somebody else. Somebody paid money for a little picture of somebody they didn't know that they are somehow under the spell of. And if you saw this in the original and not in a copy, you'd know what I'm talking about. There's something unusual about the daguerreotype that's unusually human, that's unusually otherworldly also. It's the closest thing to real magic you're going to get that I know of. And it does something in photography that other photographs do, but not as well. And it does something that other photography does not do. It does something more than other forms of photography. And that's the special nature of the daguerreotype. And I've talked too long, and you've been very good and patient, and thank you very much. my family I brought to this thing. The application of photography to the biological imperative's commercial potential was immediate and very highly developed in France. There was a very large production of erotic and pornographic daguerreotypes in France. You don't see the evidence of it in other countries. There are some references to it. I've seen 3 or 4 American pieces. There are references to pictures being made that shouldn't be made. England, Germany. But there wasn't a large commercial production like there was in France. I know of, I gave a talk on erotic daguerreotype here to the Society. I know of about 1,200 French stereo daguerreotypes. And let's say I know half of the ones in the world. So it's a large number if you say that only 1% of every daguerreotype that was made survives. I think it testifies to the fact that it was. You know, this whole issue of pornography has been left out of the history of photography. The application, the sort of augmenting sexuality through technology. It's a big business. They're working on it now. You're on the verge of 3D without glasses, TV coming soon. It's already this, it's already, well, I'll tell you something. You want to see where photographic technology is going? Pay attention to pornography. It is always the leading edge of the evolution of the ever more convincing illusion of reality. They have pornography now in which you can be in the picture. Not the picture in your room, but you can be the star of what's going on. Have you seen that? Of course, I'm a scholar. It's a very interesting topic. It's of course difficult to address in public, but it's been left out of the history of photography, and it's almost 50% probably of the application, just as the internet. Well, how much do they say? Some incredible amount of the internet is devoted to some sort of exploitation of the biological imperative. Commercial exploitation of it. It's not art. It's artfully done. It's not done as art. It's done to make money, just like I said. And sure, I mean, what are you going to do with the camera? It's a way of looking at yourself. Do you look at yourself in the bathroom mirror with no clothes on? Yeah, sometimes. You can say no. You try not to, right? That's right. But you could look out the bathroom window to the next bathroom and maybe see something better. Anyway, there's a lot to say about it. It was in the daguerreotype very, very much, but particularly in France, but in the United States too. If anyone else has anything to add to it. I've only seen 3 or 4 at the most, right? But that means if there's 3 or 4 now, that means there were 3,000 at one time, just on the general attrition rate. Yeah? One more question and that's it. Make it a good one. Anybody? Yes?
Can you explain how they're made?
Yes. Very carefully. Just yeah. How are they made? The plate is polished. And the polishing has 2 effects. One is to make the mirror finish as reflective as possible, but that makes the black of the picture by reflection over the plate. And to clean the silver chemically of any of the tarnish compound, silver sulfide, or any grease that might be on it. The plate is then exposed to the fumes of metallic iodine. Iodine is a metal in its natural form, and it fumes at room temperature. It goes from a metallic state to a gaseous state. And that rising purple, iodine means purple. Iod is Greek, it means purple. There's a purple colored gas that comes off this grayish metal, and that reaches the silver and forms silver iodide, which is light sensitive. The original process used only one sensitizing, and I'm going to describe that for brevity's sake. So the iodine makes it light sensitive. It's just like a piece of film or photo paper. You expose it to light, you're going to get a reaction. You let it out long enough, it would darken, but a brief exposure would allow for development of the latent image that formed by exposing the plate to the fumes of metallic mercury, the heated mercury. Mercury is that magical metal, right? It's a liquid. It behaves like a liquid. It fumes when you heat it. More of it comes up. Mercury rises and condenses on the silver plate everywhere where light hit the plate. More light, more mercury, less light, less mercury. It's then fixed, made no longer light sensitive. The silver iodide dissolved off. So you have a deposit of mercury, little mercury dots on the silver plate, which when in the proper light, the mercury scatters light and creates lights, and the silver polished surface gives you a dark, something like a pointillist painting, white dots on a black velvet ground. So the imaging particle is a light scattering, a bright little globule of mercury. So what you're seeing there is the light parts of the picture is mercury. The dark parts, the reflected silver. Then there's a couple other things to do. Gold, so that you could color it. Otherwise it wipes off. It's a very beautiful process to do. Let me tell you something. It sounds hard, and it is hard, but it didn't have commercial dominance internationally because it was that hard. Right? It could be learned by shoemakers, blacksmiths, carpenters, and learned well and done well. It was a very practical process. It's very simple, very beautiful, and at the same time very complex and very difficult. It's finding how to balance it, and no two people make a daguerreotype or ever made a daguerreotype exactly the same way. It's a balancing of variables. It's a very, very beautiful process, which is also one of the things that makes it special. The beautiful aspect of photography has been removed more and more with the progress of photography in a certain way. The craft of photography, the time, the smell, the sight. The daguerreotype is visually very beautiful to make. It's like Zen archery. It isn't so much hitting the center of the target. It's drawing the bow right and letting it go. That's the real art. If you hit the target, okay, good. But the art of it is in the work of it. And even making a lousy daguerreotype is a thrill. You won't get paid for it, but it's a thrill. The Daguerrean Society is meeting. There's manuals for sale. Don't miss this event. This is better than the circus. It is, it is. Come one, come all. Thank you.